Are you in the top 1%? Not the Elon Musk top 1%. Not the private jet top 1%. Just the top 1% of people your age in America right now. Because I'm going to tell you the exact number you need to hit at 25, at 35, and at 45, and I guarantee at least one of those numbers is going to shock you. But before I give you the numbers, I need you to understand why most people have absolutely no idea where they actually stand, and how that ignorance is quietly destroying their future. Right now in 2026, the average American has no clue what their net worth is. They know their salary. They know their rent payment. They vaguely know they have debt. But if you ask them, what's your total net worth right now? They'd have to pull out their phone and start adding things up. And halfway through, they'd get depressed and stop. This is intentional. The system works better when you don't know the score. If you don't know you're losing, you can't change the game. So let me explain what net worth actually means, because we need to be crystal clear before we get to the numbers. Net worth is everything you own minus everything you owe. Your car, your savings account, your retirement accounts, your Pokemon cards, your stocks, your house if you own one, all of that added together. Then you subtract your student loans, your car loan, your credit card debt, your mortgage. What's left is your net worth. It can be positive or negative. If you owe more than you own, you have negative net worth. This is where millions of young Americans start, and a lot of them stay there for way longer than they should, because nobody ever taught them how the game actually works. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Federal Reserve tracks net worth across different age groups in America. They do this massive survey every 3 years called the Survey of Consumer Finances, and they break down exactly what the wealth distribution looks like at every age. They can tell you what the median person has, what the average person has, and what the top 1% has at every age bracket. This data is public, it's available, but almost nobody looks at it, which means almost nobody knows if they're ahead or behind or completely screwed. So let's start with the age group that's probably watching this video most, 25. If you're 25 years old right now, I want you to take a guess. How much net worth do you think you need to be in the top 1% of all 25-year-olds in America? Just guess. Hold that number in your head. Now let me tell you what reality looks like for most 25-year-olds first, because the context matters. The average 25-year-old in America right now has a net worth of about $120,000. That sounds pretty good until you realize that average is heavily skewed by trust fund kids and the handful of people who got lucky early. The median 25-year-old, which means the person right in the middle where half have more and half have less, has a net worth of about $31,000. That's the typical person, not rich, not poor, just typical. But a huge chunk of 25-year-olds are actually in negative net worth territory because of student loans. The average student loan debt in 2026 is about $37,000. So if you graduated from a 4-year university, bought a used car with a small loan, and you're renting an apartment, you're probably sitting somewhere between negative $20,000 and positive $10,000 in net worth. You're not in the 1%. You're not even close. You're in the bottom 40%, and that's completely normal. The question is whether you understand what it takes to climb out of that hole, or whether you're going to spend the next 10 years treading water while inflation eats you alive. So what's the number? What does it take to be in the top 1% at age 25? The answer is $2.1 million. $2,100,000. At 25 years old. Now before you close this video and throw your phone across the room, let me explain why that number is so insane and who actually hits it. This isn't $2 million in annual income. This is $2 million in total net worth. That means someone at 25 years old owns over $2 million in assets after paying off any debt they have. How does anyone actually do that? There are basically 4 paths. Path 1 is inheritance. Your parents or grandparents gave you money or property. You didn't earn it. You were born into it. Path 2 is you got extremely lucky with equity. You joined a startup at employee number 5, it went public, your stock options are worth millions. Or you bought Bitcoin in 2015 and held it. Path 3 is you're a professional athlete or entertainer who signed a massive contract right out of college. Path 4, and this is the rarest one, is you built and sold a business in your early 20s that actually succeeded at scale. We're talking about someone who started an e-commerce brand at 20, scaled it to multiple millions in revenue, and sold it for a 7-figure exit by 24. Notice what's not on that list. Working a normal job and saving aggressively. It's not there because the math doesn't work. If you graduate at 22 and you get a great job making $80,000 a year and you somehow manage to save half your income after taxes, you're saving maybe $25,000 a year. Over 3 years, that's $75,000 saved. You'd need to turn that $75,000 into $2 million in 3 years, which would require a 2,600% return. That doesn't happen with index funds. That happens with massive risk and massive luck. So if you're 25 and you're not at 2 million, congratulations, you're in the 99% with literally everyone else your age who didn't inherit wealth or hit the lottery. But here's what you should actually care about. The top 1% threshold at 25 is not your goal. It's not realistic. It's not achievable for 99% of people, which is literally what 1% means. The actual goal at 25 is to not be in negative net worth. And if you are in negative net worth because of student loans, the goal is to have a plan to get to zero as fast as possible and then start building. If you're 25 right now and you're at negative 20,000, your goal for this year is to get to negative 10,000. Next year, zero. The year after that, 25,000 positive. You're not trying to beat the 1%. You're trying to beat your past self every single year. Now let's jump to 35 because this is where things get really interesting and where most people start to realize they're way further behind than they thought they'd be. At 35, you've been in the workforce for over a decade. You've probably changed jobs a few times. Maybe you bought a house. Maybe you got married or had kids. You're supposed to be entering your peak earning years. And the wealth you've built by this point is going to determine what the rest of your life looks like. So let's start with the typical 35-year-old. The median net worth for someone at 35 is about $139,000. That usually breaks down to some equity in a house if they bought one, maybe $30,000 or $40,000 in retirement accounts, a paid-off car, and not much else. The average is way higher at about $500,000, but again, that's pulled up by people who are doing really well. The vast majority of 35-year-olds are somewhere between $50,000 and $300,000 in net worth. They're not broke. They're not rich. They're just building slowly, assuming they're building at all. A lot of 35-year-olds are still carrying student loan debt. A lot of them bought houses right before interest rates went crazy, and now they're locked into mortgages they can barely afford. A lot of them have kids and just watched their expenses triple. The 35-year-old experience in 2026 is realizing that adulting is way more expensive than anyone warned you about. So what does the top 1% look like at 35? Before I tell you, think about people you know who are 35. Think about the most financially successful person you know at that age. What do you think their net worth is? Hold that image. The top 1% threshold at 35 is $4.7 million. $4,700,000 at 35 years old. That's not a typo. That's what it takes to be in the top 1% of 35-year-olds in America in 2026. How does someone get to 4.7 million by 35? Let's do the math on what that would take if you're starting from zero at 25. You have 10 years to build 4.7 million in net worth. That's 470,000 per year in wealth accumulation. If you're investing and getting a 10% average annual return, you'd need to contribute about $30,000 per month to hit that number. $30,000 a month. That's $360,000 a year you'd need to be investing, not spending. To invest $360,000 a year, you'd probably need to be making at least $600,000 in annual income. That's partner at a law firm money. That's tech executive money. That's successful business owner money. The 35-year-olds in the top 1% got there through a combination of high income and asset appreciation. They bought real estate in their late 20s and it doubled in value. They work in fields like tech, finance, medicine, or law, where six-figure salaries are normal by your 30s. They got equity in companies that grew. They started businesses that succeeded. They married, or they inherited some of it. The paths to 4.7 million by 35 all involve either making a lot of money, owning assets that skyrocketed in value, or starting with a big head start. But again, that's not your competition. You're not trying to beat the 1%. You're trying to build a life where money stops being your primary source of stress. And for most 35-year-olds, that means getting to a net worth of somewhere between $300,000 and $700,000. That's enough to have some equity in a property, a solid retirement account that's actually growing, an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses, and maybe some taxable investments starting to compound. You're not rich at that level, but you're stable. You have options. You could survive a job loss. You could take a career risk. You're not trapped. The gap between where most 35-year-olds are, which is around $140,000 in net worth, and where they should be to feel financially secure, which is around $500,000, is the gap that defines modern American anxiety. That $360,000 gap is the difference between feeling like you're building a future and feeling like you're just surviving payday to payday despite making decent money. And the tragedy is that most people don't even know the gap exists until they're 45, and it's gotten even worse. So let's talk about 45 because this is where reality really sets in. At 45, you're not young anymore. You can't tell yourself you have plenty of time to figure it out. You probably have another 20 years of prime earning left. And whatever wealth you've built by this point is going to compound into what you retire with. The typical 45-year-old in America has a median net worth of about $214,000. That's usually a house with some equity, retirement accounts with maybe $150,000 to $200,000, paid off cars, and not much liquid cash. The average is much higher at $780,000, but that average includes people doing really well and people doing terribly. Most 45-year-olds are in this weird middle zone where they're not poor, but they're definitely not rich. And they're starting to do the math on retirement and realizing the numbers don't add up. If you have $200,000 in your retirement accounts at 45 and you contribute nothing else, and it grows at 8% per year for 20 years, you'll have about $930,000 at 65. That sounds okay until you realize that $930,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate, which is the safe withdrawal rate everyone recommends, gives you $37,000 a year to live on in retirement. Add in Social Security, and maybe you get to $50,000 or $55,000 total. That's not poverty, but it's also not the retirement you probably imagined. The 45-year-olds who are actually on track to retire comfortably have net worths closer to $1 million or more. They've been maxing out retirement accounts for years. They have real estate equity that's substantial. They've gotten multiple promotions and salary increases. They've avoided major financial disasters like divorces or medical bankruptcies or business failures. They've been playing the game correctly for 20 years straight. And even they are probably not in the top 1%. So what does the top 1% look like at 45? The answer is $8.7 million. $8,700,000. That's what you need at 45 to be in the top 1% of your age group. Think about that for a second. At 25, the threshold was $2 million. At 35, it was $4.7 million. At 45, it's $8.7 million. The threshold almost doubles every decade. Why? Because wealth compounds. The people who started with advantages in their 20s have had those advantages compounding for 25 years by the time they're 45. The investments they made in their 20s have tripled. The real estate they bought has doubled or tripled. The businesses they started have grown. The careers they built are now paying 7 figures. At 45, the 1% are not working normal jobs. They're executives. They're business owners. They're doctors and lawyers who've been at the top of their fields for 2 decades. They're people who made smart bets on real estate or stocks in their 30s and watched those bets pay off massively. They're people who sold companies. They're people who inherited wealth and didn't squander it. And yeah, some of them just married into money. The paths are different, but they all lead to the same place: enough wealth that they're never going to worry about money again. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is the most important part of this entire video. The top 1% thresholds I just gave you are not goals. They're reference points. They show you what the extreme high end looks like so you can understand the full distribution. But aiming to be in the 1% is like aiming to play in the NBA. It's technically possible, but for 99% of people, it's not realistic. And spending all your energy chasing it is going to make you miserable. What you should actually be aiming for is financial security, and that number is way more achievable than you think. Financial security means you have enough saved and invested that you could survive a major disruption without your life falling apart. It means you're not living paycheck to paycheck. It means you have options. For most people, financial security looks like having a net worth of about 10 to 15 times your annual expenses by the time you want to retire. If you spend $50,000 a year, you need $500,000 to $750,000 invested. If you spend $70,000 a year, you need $700,000 to $1 million. These numbers are achievable. They're not easy, but they're achievable if you start early and you're consistent. Let me give you the actual playbook for building wealth regardless of what age you are right now, because knowing the 1% thresholds doesn't help you unless you understand what to actually do with that information. If you're in your 20s, your only job is to avoid the traps that keep people poor forever. Trap 1 is high interest debt. Credit cards charging 20% interest will destroy any attempt you make to build wealth. If you have credit card debt, paying it off is your highest priority. Not saving, not investing, killing the debt. Trap 2 is lifestyle inflation. When you get a raise, most people immediately increase their spending to match. They get a nicer apartment. They buy a nicer car. They go out more. This is how people make 6 figures and still live paycheck to paycheck. When you get a raise, keep living like you didn't and invest the difference. Trap 3 is not investing at all because you think you don't have enough to start. This is garbage. You can open a brokerage account with $100. You can start contributing to a 401k with whatever your company matches. The amount doesn't matter in your 20s, building the habit matters. If you invest $200 a month starting at 25 and you average 10% returns, you'll have over $500,000 by 60. If you wait until 35 to start, you'll have less than $200,000. That decade of waiting costs you $300,000. You cannot get that time back. If you're in your 30s, you're in the critical accumulation phase. This is where you should be aggressively building wealth because you have time for it to compound, but not so much time that you can afford to waste any of it. Your priorities should be maxing out retirement accounts, building equity in real estate if that's part of your strategy, and increasing your income as much as possible. This is the decade where you should be switching jobs strategically to maximize salary growth. The data is really clear on this. People who stay at one company for 10 years earn significantly less than people who switch companies every 2 to 3 years. Your biggest raises come from switching, not from annual reviews. If you're in your 40s, you're in the final push before retirement becomes a real consideration. If you're behind, this is your last chance to catch up. That means maximizing every retirement account you have access to. If you're over 50, you get catch-up contributions which allow you to put even more in. That means seriously evaluating whether you need to increase your income through a side business or consulting or switching to a higher-paying field. That means cutting any expenses that aren't contributing to your quality of life. You don't have time to waste money on things that don't matter anymore. And here's the most important thing regardless of your age. Automate everything. Do not rely on willpower. Do not rely on discipline. Set up automatic transfers from your checking account to your retirement accounts and your investment accounts on the same day every month. Make it so you have to actively decide to stop investing instead of actively deciding to start. Every person I know who has built real wealth did it through automation. Every person I know who's still broke despite making good money is trying to manually manage everything, and it's not working because life gets in the way. Stop complicating it. Start getting free. Success instead of resenting it. It's the initiation fee for the next level of your life. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, you'll have moments where you question everything, where you wonder if you're being extreme, where you consider just going back to normal and accepting that you'll always be broke. But here's what you need to remember in those moments. Better to be lonely at the bank than popular at the pawn shop. Better to spend Friday nights building wealth than Monday mornings regretting the weekend. Better to have 2 real friends who support your growth than 20 fake friends who need you to stay small. Better to escape the bucket alone than stay trapped in it together. Stop complicating it. Start getting free.